So I'm a bit on the shaky ground over here because I'm not a social scientist, but this paper is on social science. And I need to start with the origin of the paper because we were in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. We were in conversations with Rotterdam municipality about their digital twins. And this illustration from Gemini almost says what happened in that meeting. There was a lot of confusion based on terminologies, and throughout that project, what we are facing is this initial conversation is what actually matters when it comes to digital technical capabilities, but also how it is being used. So in this paper, Johan, who's a lead author, who's also more on the grippy grounds than me, and me, what we tried to kind of like reflect on that experience is to make this argument that digital twins are not technical systems, not just socio-technical system, but also narrated systems. So basically how we describe a digital twin. Platforms, service, models, etc. quietly shape what we do, how we'll use them, how decisions should be made. So this is not a technical talk, but a little bit of our rant, which we try to kind of try to make from the literature, but hopefully this would be okay with you. So if you look at the world around, you would see a lot of newspaper articles like these. Infrastructure digital twins promoted for transportation system, water, energy, waste system, all of those things. They promise monitoring, they promise predictive maintenance, scenario testing, better long-term planning, etc. But when we look at from the perspectives of people who make decision or adopt these are not just technical decisions, right? They involve public value, cost, environmental impact, accountability, etc. And when digital twins are entering these kind of like infrastructure decisions, the key questions become, are we designing them as computational tools, which gives us some data, which we hope good decisions would be made, or are we also designing governance environments? And we wanted to investigate what literature was telling about. But in general, if you look at from the past, in the construction and also infrastructure research, we already know that technologies do not succeed simply because they are sophisticated and technically brilliant. BIM showed us this particular aspect clearly. Even the perfect BIM, if it needs to be adopted, you need to kind of like look at the ecosystems around it. And outcome depends on how these kind of tools are interpreted, embedded in routines, and also governed. So the bottom line is when we think about digital twins, especially for infrastructure or urban resilience decision making, we need to think beyond latency, fidelity, automation, but also we need to look at things like what kind of institutional arrangements are we implementing this, or what sort of like institutions is this technology creating? Obviously, as any scientist, we did go through the literature a lot, and we kind of found most of the conversations around these three in the aspects. So one conversation is always about digital twins supporting modeling and optimization. There is acknowledgement of digital twins are operating in socio-technical environments. There's also things talking about like it supports decision making and governance, but not quite. And what was missing is that we have many studies asking what a digital twin is and what it can do. This is really important. We need those studies. But we also need a little bit more study because far fewer of them ask how the language in which we first talk about digital twin shapes expectation about use, interpretability, responsibility, and decision making. And it's a core gap because issue is not just definitional ambiguity, but it's also that all these framings carry some of assumptions. Calling a digital twin dashboard implies one kind of user and responsibility, whereas calling it a platform implies another user. So in this study, we try to see how an infrastructure digital twins framed in existing literature, in academic discourse, and what governance assumptions does these literature make. So aim is to understand these digital twin framings not as neutral descriptions, but as narratives that shapes institutional. So it's a different view of the technical papers that we were reading. And we use this particular theory, which Johan, my co-author, is really championing, called narrative theory, which shows that technologies do not spread not because of just the technical part of it, but they also spread with respect of the stories around it, success stories, also all of those that make these kind of technologies appear legitimate, desirable, and useful. The second lens that we use is the core of our research group, which is on infrastructure governance. It's about how decisions are organized around actors, institution, rules, responsibilities, and public values. So we use these two theories on top of the existing digital twin research. And our contribution is twofold, which is theoretically, it shows how technological disruption can act as institutional script. And practically, it argues that digital twin adoption should be treated not just as technical, but also a design challenge around a decision process, including authority and accountability. So what we did, we looked at 75 peer-reviewed publications on digital twins infrastructure, talking around governance aspect, and it was focused on digital twins as, not just digital twin, because digital twin as gives the framing elements on it. Then after that, we analyzed it in 3 stages, extracting the framing statements, then kind of coding it using these 2 analytical lenses that we had and interpreting it across to understand the implications on institutional roles and governance. So we got 7 framings predominant in the literature and 1 pattern. So mostly the framings are dominantly technical, like product, platform, service, dashboard, predictive or optimization system. So these are the major framings. But recent literature is also moving towards organizational and governance question, which is really good, such as organizational capability and decision environment. But overall, the pattern is clear. The discourse is much stronger in explaining what digital twins technically do than explaining how they reshape decision making. So that's the first finding that we had. The second finding is about the software metaphors across digital twin datasets, which is similar. These framings are given here. These are not wrong. These are really good framings. I'm not arguing that we need completely different one. These are really useful for describing the technical capability. But while doing that, there is a consequential effect that they foreground is engineering, rationality, and background, the institutional negotiation between how digital twins are created. And also, there is a slight problematic thing when we think about infrastructure decision making, because these are things as we have something, that's the truth. And that's what we need to do. This is the prescriptive sort of digital twins, whereas the decision making is more or less collective in large infrastructure projects or in urban resilience project, which we study. Another thing that we found is that decision making is often mentioned, but it's not explained or unpacked in any of these papers. They say it improves decision. The most of the arguments are, if there is more data or more outcome, more graphs, better decisions are made, which is not really true. So they rarely specify whose decision, under what rules, with what accountability it changes. And the third finding is stronger. Governance-centered framings on who decides, who's accountable, whose values counts, never go into these digital twins. So if these questions are absent from these framing, later in the decisions it kind of comes about, we might not have some of these institutional design. So conclusion is not that digital twins should stop becoming technical, but what they should be technically robust, but they are also to support strategic planning, cross-agency coordination, and public accountability. So governance cannot be just assumed from increased data or better data. It has to be designed. So that's our kind of like conclusion here. So what we did is kind of move the narrative from digital twin as a technical system to kind of encourage all of us, the community, to also consider this governance environment when we think about developing digital twins or any technical system whatsoever. And because digital twin does not just represent infrastructure, it shapes how all this authority, responsibility, and coordination are imagined later. And next step for us is to kind of compare this academic narrative and public practitioner discourse with policy frameworks and real implementation cases, with kind of like the point that story we tell about digital twins shapes the governance that we make. So that's all with my presentation. If you got interested in narratives, my colleague Johan has a book on how narrative shapes mega projects, if you're interested to read more about it and get more into this theory. Thank you everyone for listening.